Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
Roxanne. Lucian had never felt happier when he saw her come out. Roxanne should be very clear about what it means to open the door after everything I have said. Roxanne was plagued with a myriad of feelings. She raised her eyes and glanced faintly at him. Her voice carried a hint of exhaustion. Didn't you say you wanted to have a talk with me? You can start now." After her words fell, Lucian still kept silent. Lucian stared morosely at her. A long while passed before he reached out his hands to touch her eyes. Roxanne closed her eyes instinctively, and she felt Lucian's calloused fingers brush past her eyes. Did you cry?" Instantly, Lucian's joy was replaced by remorse and pity. His voice did not sound as calm as usual. Roxanne's eyelids trembled. Her eyes slowly opened, but she avoided his gaze uncomfortably. "I'm just too tired. I thought about the past and I couldn't help but..." Just as she said that, she was pulled into a warm embrace. Roxanne froze momentarily. After she regained her senses, she struggled instinctively. What are you doing? Let go of me." However, Lucian was unmoved. His grip around her tightened as if he wanted to enshroud her into him. His embrace made it difficult for Roxanne to breathe. She kept pushing him away. Don't be like this. The kids are still downstairs."
Lucian uttered, "I'm sorry."
His warm breath was near her ear. "I'm sorry for everything you've been through all these years. I can't make up for it, no matter what I do." Roxanne was stunned momentarily when she heard his words, and she gradually quietened down. Lucian's grip finally loosened as he seemed to have sensed her discomfort. However, he continued, "Please give me a chance to redeem myself. Let me protect you in the future. I won't let you shed another tear. I'll also treat Archie and Benny like my biological children. I won't let them go even if their biological father comes looking for them." Roxanne felt that his words were like a sledgehammer hitting her heart forcefully, making it hard for her to breathe properly. She did not realize how long she had been waiting for these words until she heard Lucian say them. Over the years, Roxanne had raised Archie and Benny alone, wary that Lucian would discover their identity. In truth, she did it mainly out of her fear that he would take them away from her. However, Lucian had reassured her that they would live together peacefully and that he would protect all of them. Roxanne had longed for a shoulder to cry on since she had stayed strong for a very long time. She raised her hand slowly, wanting to hug Lucian back. However, Roxanne caught the glimpse of the stairs from the corner of her eyes when she raised her hand. She saw 3 tiny heads shrinking their head back at the corner of the stairs. Roxanne froze immediately. After a brief pause, she regained her composure and pushed Lucian away hurriedly. "Let go of me first. The children are watching." Lucian's brow furrowed. With Roxanne in his arms, he turned back to look. Estella, Benny, and Archie were standing at the corner of the stairs together. They stuck out their tongue meekly when they met Lucian's gaze. "Essie, it's all because of you. Mommy is looking over here. Why are you not hiding?" Benny complained, lowering his head. Estella, who was mentioned, blinked twice. She looked all innocent. Benny could not help but chuckle after complaining. His laughter influenced the other 2 children to chuckle uncontrollably as well. The children came upstairs to take a look as they were worried about Roxanne. However, they did not expect to see the scene of Lucian hugging Roxanne when they went up. Hence, the children paused in their steps and hid in the corner to watch secretly. They were all a little taken aback to see that Roxanne was attempting to return Lucian's hug. Their eyes were wide with expectation, and they did not notice when Roxanne was looking back at them. Although the children were caught peeking, they were much happier than any other day. Becoming a family shouldn't be a far-fetched dream from how Mommy and Daddy have gone further than reconciling. "Let go of me now." Roxanne's face flushed, and her voice was brimming with guilt from being seen by her children. Lucian then let go of her slowly, but one of his arms was still on her waist. He looked solemnly at the children, who had ruined his mood. When did you guys come up? The children exchanged glances. Finally, Archie said, we were here when you were hugging Mommy. Roxanne's face got progressively redder when she heard his response. Lucian frowned. Remember to hide really far away when you see things like this in the future. The children responded obediently. Okay. We will make sure not to be seen by Mommy next time. Lucian's face darkened, and he did not say anything. Roxanne's brow furrowed, and she looked at them in embarrassment and anger. You don't sprout nonsense. We were just... She struggled for a while to think of a good reason. However, Roxanne was teased by her children. Mommy's face is so red. When she heard that, Roxanne held her tongue and instinctively raised her hand over her face. Indeed, her face was burning. A flash of panic filled her eyes. She got away from Lucian quickly after realizing that she was still held by him. This time, Lucian did not stop her. Roxanne surreptitiously breathed a sigh of relief. Archie noticed Roxanne's face had turned crimson red, and he changed the topic. Mommy, can you cook us lunch since you're feeling better now? We're starving. Benny and Estella, who was at the side, nodded in agreement. They stared fixedly at Roxanne. Roxanne's mood improved considerably when she saw that the children were no longer pestering her over what happened earlier. I'll make lunch now. You can eat some snacks or fruits to fill your stomach if you're really hungry. Roxanne did not dare to look at Lucian after her words fell. She walked away from him in a rush and headed downstairs. When Roxanne walked to the stairs, Lucian's voice rang again. I haven't eaten lunch yet. If it's possible, can you make something for me too? After saying that, Lucian added another sentence as if he was afraid that Roxanne would turn him down. I can order takeout if it's not convenient. After Lucian spoke, the children asked innocently in a childish voice, Mr. Farwell, what? Are you going to order? We want to eat the same food as you. Lucian began talking about the takeouts Caden often got for him. The children were enticed since the selection of food sounded so good. Roxanne listened helplessly to their happy conversation. I have already prepared the ingredients. I can cook something up quickly. There's no need to order takeout. Estella, Benny, and Archie rejoiced in silence after hearing what Roxanne had to say. They then turned to stare at Lucian. Lucian smiled. What a shame. I'll take you guys there to eat next time. The kids jumped for joy upon hearing that. Roxanne felt warm and fuzzy as she watched the scene before her. She didn't say anything anymore and went downstairs to prepare dinner. Next, Lucian took the 3 kids and followed closely behind. Estella, Archie, and Benny surrounded Lucian and looked at him with faces full of anticipation in the living room. Mr. Farwell, when can you become our daddy? Benny stared fixedly at Lucian. Lucian caressed his head gently. Soon. Don't worry. I won't let anyone else have the chance to become your father. Hearing that, Benny gave a small cheer. Immediately, Estella chipped in. Daddy, you must keep your promise this time. Lucian once promised Estella he would make Roxanne her mother, but Lucian had a fallout with Roxanne. In the end, Aubrey was the one who ended up looking after her. The incident had left a lingering fear in her heart. Lucian turned to face Estella apologetically. I will. It was all my fault last time, but I've thought things through now, so it won't happen again. Estella puffed her cheeks and stared at her father with a hint of resentment in her eyes. Mr. Farwell. Archie stood at a corner and spoke in a serious tone. Miss Pearson and Miss Queen will apologize to Mommy, right? Will they come and mess with Mommy again? In fact, he had wanted to ask when Lucian would call off his engagement with Aubrey, but decided to hint at it instead. After all, they were father and son, so Lucian caught on to his meaning immediately. He replied grimly, I won't let them off the hook this time. Don't worry, guys. I'll take care of things on my end. Archie nodded and turned to look in the direction of the kitchen. Lucian followed his gaze to see Roxanne busying herself there. And his gaze softened. Go play on your own for a bit. I'll go and help your mommy prepare dinner. With that, Lucian stood up and was about to make his way to the kitchen when he paused in his footsteps. You guys can stay here. The kitchen is rather smoky. The kids nodded and gave him a knowing smile, indicating that they would let Lucian spend some alone time with Roxanne this time around. Lucian then turned around and went into the kitchen. On the other hand, Roxanne's mind was occupied with the series of events as she cooked. Lucian's words had caught her completely off guard. She couldn't help but regret her actions now that she thought about it. How can I forgive him so easily? She cut the vegetables angrily and forcefully upon the thought. Just as she was lost in her thoughts, Lucian's voice sounded from behind her. What are you thinking about? Lucian stared at her, feeling baffled. She didn't even notice I was standing behind her. I wonder what is on her mind right now. Roxanne's hands slipped as she was jolted back to her senses. Be careful. Lucian quickly reached out and grabbed her hand, effectively stopping her from accidentally chopping her fingers off. He then guided her hand to put the knife down. The both of them stood in silence as they recovered from the shock. Let me help you. Lucian picked up the kitchen knife as he returned to his senses. Seeing Lucian holding a kitchen knife in his hand felt weird as he looked like a nobleman in his expensive tailored shirt and trousers. He looks out of place. Roxanne was at a loss for words as she watched on. She had wanted to treat Lucian coldly when he told her to make way but was too stunned to do so. Lucian clumsily sliced through the vegetables as he wasn't used to doing all this. He managed to double the amount of time Roxanne would have normally spent on cutting the vegetables. Roxanne quickly returned to her senses just as Lucian was about to carry on with preparing dinner. Please leave the rest to me. Lucian stepped aside and watched Roxanne as he knew he wasn't good at cooking. Roxanne felt awkward being watched, so her actions were rather stiff. Are you regretting your actions just now? Lucian suddenly spoke up. Roxanne paused as his question completely caught her off guard. The surprise almost caused her to flip the pan. Lucian reached out and grabbed her hand before things could get any worse. Did you regret letting me off the hook so easily? Roxanne was at a loss for words as his questions hit the nail on the head. She tensed up as he spoke and thought that they were going to part ways on a sour note again. However, Lucian tightened his grip on her wrist. I won't let you regret your decision ever. Roxanne turned off the stove with mixed feelings, but couldn't bring herself to turn around since Lucian was standing behind her. I've promised you I would give you an explanation. It was my fault you lost faith in me as I allowed this to drag on. His warm breath tickled the back of her ear. She secretly felt glad that her back was facing him, or else he would have seen the hesitation on her face. You've finally forgiven me after so long. I can't go down the wrong path anymore. As he said that, Lucian let go of her hand. Don't worry. I'll give you an explanation for the things that happened today. Roxanne could tell that he was being serious. She asked nervously, what are you going to do? Lucian kept quiet and dialed Aubrey's number instead. It was time he called off his engagement with Aubrey. After a moment of silence, Roxanne turned around to check on him and immediately saw his phone screen. A wave of nervousness crashed through her when she saw the number he dialed. Nevertheless, nobody picked up the phone on the other end. Lucian hung up after a while, feeling frustrated. His gaze softened again when he turned to Roxanne. I'll talk to her and give you an explanation. You were never a homewrecker, to begin with. Lucian continued in a determined tone. My wife has always been you, and you alone all along. Roxanne's eyes fluttered and her heart skipped a beat. She lowered her gaze in a wave of panic as she didn't know how to face him. However, Lucian grabbed her chin and forced her to meet his eyes. Trust me. Following Lucian's gentle murmur, a soft kiss fell on Roxane's lips. Roxane instinctively held her breath and gazed at the man before her dazedly. Her eyes flickered when she thought of his words earlier, and she finally let down her guard. Although Lucian wanted to deepen the kiss, he could only test the waters carefully as he wasn't sure about Roxane's feelings. Sensing that, Roxane slowly closed her eyes. The next second, Lucian pulled her into his arms and engulfed her in a heated kiss. After a long time, Roxane began to run out of breath. She pushed at Lucian's chest, and only then did he let go of her reluctantly. Lucian panted heavily with furrowed brows, his eyes as deep as the ocean. As he stared at Roxane, it seemed as if he was going to devour her. Upon meeting his eyes, Roxane felt her heart skip a beat. She averted her gaze in a panic and forced herself to stay calm. Let's eat. The kids must be starving." Then, she dished up the food nonchalantly to bring them to the dining table and, at the same time, escape from Lucian. The emotions churning in Lucian's eyes were so passionate that she somehow felt scared. Just as Roxane passed by Lucian, his low, hoarse voice sounded beside her ear. This time, don't try to pretend as if nothing happened. It's been so long since Essie wanted you to be her mommy. Don't you think of running away?" Roxane paused for a millisecond, but she quickened her footsteps the next moment and left the kitchen. There was no one in the living room. Archie, Benny, and Estella had tactfully gone to the courtyard to avoid disturbing their parents. After placing the dishes on the table, Roxane stood in place for a while to calm herself down before walking to the door to call the kids. "Mommy, where's Mr. Farwell?" The trio sat by the dining table and looked around curiously. Lucian's plate and cutlery were set on the table, but the man was nowhere to be seen. Roxane glanced at the kitchen out of reflex and flashed them a sheepish smile. He's still in the kitchen. He'll be here soon." As if hearing their conversation, Lucian came out of the kitchen right after Roxane's words fell. Hearing footsteps behind her, Roxane turned around. When she saw Lucian's unkempt shirt, the feelings she had barely managed to suppress were stirred up again. Even her face started to flush uncontrollably. On the other hand, Lucian strolled over with an unbothered expression even under their stares. Sorry to keep you waiting." Lucian sat across Roxane and smiled apologetically at the kids. In return, the trio exchanged glances before telling Lucian it was okay. Except for Roxane, everyone at the table was in a great mood. During the meal, they kept placing food on each other's plates. Roxane did that repeatedly for the three children out of habit. When she finally turned her attention back to her own plate, she discovered it was full of her favorite food. Across her, Lucian retracted his hand leisurely. From the looks of it, he was going to get her more. Roxane felt her heart flutter, but she immediately stopped him. That's enough. I can't eat so much." Lucian listened to her and finally halted his actions. Meanwhile, Archie, Benny, and Estella stared at the two adults. As Roxane was still not used to this kind of atmosphere, she looked a little helpless. How is your mommy's cooking? Is it good?" Lucian's cheerful voice broke the awkwardness. The kids instantly understood what he meant and looked away from Roxane. Yes. They answered sweetly. Taking that opportunity, Lucian began chatting with them. Roxane heaved a silent sigh of relief. At the sight of the pile of food on her plate, she was suddenly overcome with a bittersweet feeling. After lunch, Roxane noticed Lucian seemed to make a phone call. In no time, the mansion's doorbell rang. Roxane opened the door and saw Jonathan standing outside with a smile. He quickly swept his gaze over her and was relieved to find that she was unhurt. Breaking into a grin, he said, Dr. Jarvis, I'm here to pick up Lucian. Where is he?" Earlier, Lucian had called Jonathan and asked the latter to pick him up. There were things they had to discuss face to face. Jonathan could more or less guess what Lucian wanted to talk about, so he did not reject the request. Right after hanging up, he rushed over. As if worried that Roxane would be suspicious, Jonathan added casually, "Oh, it's about work. We have to talk at the company, and since I was nearby, I dropped by to pick him up." Roxanne found Jonathan's expression a bit strange, but she did not probe. After all, Jonathan had said that it was about work, so it should have nothing much to do with her. Roxanne stepped aside and let Jonathan in. He's inside. Go on in and call him." Without hesitation, Jonathan took a step forward to head into the house. At that moment, Lucian appeared with the 3 kids trailing behind him. Upon spotting Jonathan, the trio greeted him in unison. "Hello, Mr. Queen." Jonathan was delighted to see the kids looking genuinely happy. "Hello, little ones. I came in such a hurry that I forgot to buy you gifts. I'll make it up to you next time, all right?" The kids nodded obediently and turned to Lucian with puppy eyes. Mr. Farwell, are you leaving already?" Benny asked, reluctant to part with Lucian. Lucian stroked Benny's head and told him, I have some things to attend to. I'll see you tomorrow." Archie, Benny, and Estella all looked unwilling to say goodbye just yet. Although they practically ate with Lucian and Roxanne every day over the past few days, this day was different. They wished they could just stick to the couple's side from this day on, but to their disappointment, Lucian was leaving so soon. Lucian rubbed the children's heads one by one to make them feel better. Next, he strode toward Roxanne. Since Jonathan and the kids were there, Roxanne couldn't help but feel nervous. She had no idea what Lucian was going to do. Fortunately, Lucian only approached her and told her, "Wait for me. I'll make it clear to you." As Roxanne took in Lucian's deep voice, she looked at him in confusion. However, Lucian had already spun on his heels and walked to Jonathan's side by then. Without pausing, he headed outside. Jonathan hurriedly bid goodbye to Roxanne and the children. We'll get going then. See you." The children waved at him politely. Turning around, Jonathan swiftly caught up to Lucian. The 2 men got into Jonathan's car without even sparing a glance at Lucian's vehicle. While Roxanne watched them leave with the kids by her side, questions started to pop up in her mind. Jonathan had said they were going to the company to talk about work. Yet before Jonathan came, Lucian never mentioned anything about it. Aside from that, what Lucian said before he left made Roxanne nervous for some reason. Make it clear to me? What is he referring to? Is it about Aubrey and Frida's commotion earlier today, or... When an idea occurred to Roxanne, she snapped back to her senses. Anticipation began to grow in her heart. Lucian, how's Dr. Jarvis?" Jonathan gingerly asked after they had driven for some distance. It was bad enough that one could cut the tension in the car with a knife, but it was even worse to see a grim-faced Lucian in the rearview mirror. Naturally, Jonathan couldn't help but wonder if he had imagined the earlier interaction. "I remember Lucian being perfectly normal with Roxanne and the kids just now. Why has he done a 180 since getting into the car?" Alas, Lucian merely shot Jonathan a cold stare and asked, "Where are Aubrey and your sister?" "I sent them to the hospital," Jonathan replied, sheepishly touching his nose as he did. "Take me there." Left with no other choice, Jonathan sighed inwardly and nodded. Damn it. I wonder if he'll take his anger out on our family when he sees Frida later. After a few seconds of silence, Jonathan composed himself and brought the focus back to Roxanne and Lucian. By the way, Dr. Jarvis wasn't hurt, was she? Lucian shook his head, his expression somber. No, she wasn't. I checked. Then again, so what if she wasn't injured? Seeing her cry made my heart ache even more. Aubrey must have gone after her because of you. Did Dr. Jarvis say anything? Jonathan probed before getting the nagging feeling that something was off. Wait a minute. You didn't piss Dr. Jarvis off again, did you? Lucian's gaze darkened when he noticed the difference in his friend's tone. No. I won't do that again. Jonathan, however, was perplexed by that answer. I don't think I can ever forget the previous incident, Lucian added somberly. After having experienced the pain of almost losing her, all I want to do now is make her happy. Seeing Aubrey pick on Roxanne only reminded me of how much the latter suffered from her mood fluctuations after she regained consciousness. I don't want to put her through that kind of ordeal again. Upon hearing his friend's words, Jonathan felt a wave of relief wash over him. That's more like it. If you had realized this sooner, perhaps there wouldn't be so many problems. That's why I won't let anyone who has hurt her off the hook. With that, Jonathan's heart lurched. Why did Frida have to do all those stupid things? I've warned her time and time again to stay out of Lucian's private matters, yet she still had to tag along with Aubrey. Look what she's done now. Who knows if Grandpa can take the stress if Lucian unleashes his anger on our family. That's what scares me the most. Plagued by worry, Jonathan gradually slowed down his driving. Alas, despite doing his best to buy more time, they eventually still arrived at the hospital. Having resigned himself to fate, Jonathan stepped out of the car and led the way. The two men strode into the hospital, and it wasn't long before they got to Aubrey's ward. The subordinates tasked with looking after Aubrey and Frida immediately greeted Jonathan. Hello, Mr. Queen. Has she woken up? As soon as Jonathan's question left his mouth, he heard what sounded like an argument coming from the ward. Knowing it could only be his half-witted sister talking to Aubrey, he quickly cleared his throat. As much as he was mad at Frida, she was still his sister and a part of the Queen family. There was no way he could leave her in the lurch. Besides, if she were to spout any more nonsense, not even he might be able to protect her. The two women in the ward seemed to have heard the noise outside and quickly quietened down. Seconds later, Frida got up and opened the door. Upon seeing the men, she panicked so much that she had to clench her fists tight to calm herself down. Lucian, have you come to visit Aubrey? Her injuries are pretty bad. I blame. Unfortunately, before she could finish her sentence, Jonathan interrupted. Shut up. This is for Lucian and Aubrey to discuss between themselves. I want you to come here right now. Stunned by her brother's sudden outburst, Frida glared at him and was about to retort when she saw Lucian's cold-eyed stare. After feeling a chill run down her spine, Frida promptly swallowed her words and walked out with her head hung low. Lucian, on the other hand, said nothing and entered the ward. With that, Frida stood outside, dazed and frozen from Lucian's terrifying stare. Meanwhile, Aubrey wiped her scowl away and recomposed herself as soon as she heard the commotion. By the time Lucian walked in, she had plastered a look of surprise and hurt on her face. Lucian, what brings you here? Even though she stiffened at the sight of Lucian's expression, she still managed to keep her smile and quickly added, come on, take a seat. Instead, Lucian stood by the bed and stared her down. Who told you to look for Roxanne? A glint flashed across Aubrey's eyes as she calmly shared her sob story. You said Essie was at Mrs. Farwell's, so I swung by to visit her. However, when I was told that wasn't the case, I figured you must have sent Essie to Ms. Jarvis. I was worried Mrs. Farwell might storm Ms. Jarvis' place and overwhelm her. That's why I decided to make the trip myself. The next second, Aubrey looked down at her injured arm and choked out, I believe I was very polite and reasonable. After all, I only wanted to take Essie home before Mrs. Farwell showed up. However, Miss Jarvis ignored my pleas and attacked me without warning. Look at my arm. It's so severely injured that I still can't move it. Have I offended Miss Jarvis in any way? Why must she be so cruel toward me? Even as she spoke, Aubrey stole glimpses of Lucian to gauge his reaction. Alas, no matter how miserable she made herself seem, the man remained stern and cold. One thing was for sure. The atmosphere around him was growing increasingly tense by the second. Having sensed Aubrey's lingering gaze, Lucian suddenly frowned and turned to her. After seeing the disgust and hatred in the latter's eyes, Aubrey felt her hair stand on end as she became panic-stricken. Lucian, she stuttered. Are you mad that I looked for Miss Jarvis? I promise never to show up in front of her again. She has just recovered, so I understand her emotions might be all over the place. In any case, this is a small injury. I can overlook it. Shut up. Lucian bellowed. He already knew the truth, but hearing Aubrey twist the facts and picturing a teary-eyed Roxanne only further stoked his rage. Aubrey trembled and instantly held her tongue, eyes wild with fear as she stared at the man before her. Aubrey Pearson, I'm sure you've been acting a lot in front of my mother and me all these years. Haven't you had enough? Lucian snapped, his face devoid of warmth. Lucian, what are you talking about? Of course, Aubrey would never admit to what she did, so she had no choice but to continue playing coy. However, Lucian did not let her finish her sentence. We're both at fault for letting our joke of an engagement drag on for 6 years. Now, it's time to end it. After you get discharged, I'll announce the end of the relationship between our families. I'm only doing this for old Mr. Pearson's sake, so play along if you know what's good for you. We're calling it off? Aubrey widened her eyes in shock and took quite a while before regaining her senses. It took me 6 years to finally get Lucian to give me another chance. I can't believe my dream shattered when I'm this close to realizing it. How can he be so cruel to me? No. I won't allow this to happen. I've worked so hard for 6 years, so there's no way I'm going to let him get his way. Ignoring the injury on her arm, Aubrey gritted her teeth and reached out to grab the hem of Lucian's shirt. Her arm trembled uncontrollably in pain as she begged, Lucian, give me another chance. I know I was wrong, I won't make the same mistake again. Lucian simply looked coldly at Aubrey as she continued pitifully, I promise I'll do whatever you want. You can ask me to do anything. I won't see Ms. Jarvis. Just please forgive me. I've waited so many years for you, Lucian. Does that mean nothing to you? If you really cared about the engagement, you wouldn't have been foolish enough to cross the line time and again, stated Lucian impatiently. Aubrey's eyes turned red as she explained, I was just jealous. She went away for 6 years, but you were still so good to her when she returned. I waited 6 years for you, yet you couldn't even spare me a glance. Before Aubrey could finish her sentence, Lucian coldly shook off the hand clinging to the hem of his shirt. After crying out in pain, Aubrey tried to keep Lucian by her side even though she was already breaking out in a cold sweat. Lucian took 2 steps backward indifferently. If you really do understand that you were wrong, then stay away from them. Otherwise, I'll disregard the years we had together. I'm only showing you mercy today for old Mr. Pearson's sake. With that, Lucian turned around and walked out, leaving Aubrey to stare at his back. Lucian! Cried Aubrey at the top of her lungs, yet the man showed no sign of slowing down. Aubrey burst into tears as she watched the door close before her. At that moment, there was nothing but hysteria in her eyes. It's over. It's all over. The 6 years I spent to maintain the engagement. Meanwhile, Fried froze for a few seconds at the door before being forcefully dragged back to her ward by Jonathan. Frida's arm had not recovered completely, so when her brother yanked it, she hissed in pain. Are you out of your mind? I'm your sister, and I'm still hurt. How could you treat me like this? Questioned Frida furiously after struggling to regain her balance. Looking daggers at his sister, Jonathan responded, I thought you forgot that you were still a queen. Look at the foolish things you did. Do you even care about our family? Frida was stricken with fear when she remembered the look Lucian gave her, but continued to put on a brave face. What makes you think I don't care about our family? Who do you think will reap the benefits after I help Aubrey become Mrs. Farwell? An idiot! Exclaimed Jonathan, convinced that his sister would be the death of him. However, Frida was only just getting started. If it weren't for Roxanne, Lucian and Aubrey would have gotten married long ago. At that point, Jonathan wanted nothing more than to slap some sense into his sister. Can you still not see the truth? Even if Dr. Jarvis didn't return, there was no way Lucian would marry Aubrey. When Frida heard that, she began to doubt herself. How's that possible? I remember how he used to. Having witnessed how obsessed Lucian was with Aubrey 6 years ago, Frida was convinced Roxanne was the reason Lucian and Aubrey did not end up together. You shut your mouth. If Lucian really loved Aubrey, why didn't he marry her? Dr. Jarvis has always been the one he loves. Rebuked Jonathan. That's impossible. Suddenly, Frida did not sound as confident as she did before. Then how about you tell me why Lucian refused to marry Aubrey if he loved her so much? Questioned Jonathan with furrowed eyebrows. Frida trembled as she continued to doubt herself. But even if Lucian didn't love Aubrey, they were engaged. Besides, Roxanne's had a children with another man. It's impossible that she'd be worthy of someone like Lucian. Lucian has already decided to call off the engagement. Roared Jonathan. Immediately after hearing that, Frida dropped her jaw because she could not believe her ears. How can that be? It's been 6 years, so why would Lucian suddenly decide to call off the engagement? If he wanted to do that, why didn't he say anything about it earlier? Jonathan gave his sister a disappointed look before responding. I told you long ago to stop getting involved in Lucian's personal affairs, but you just wouldn't listen. Look how it turned out. If this affects our family, I won't go easy on you even though you're my sister. Frida was already buried in self-doubt when she heard her brother's harsh words. Looking incredulously at her sibling, she cried, Jonathan. I don't have a sister as stupid as you. Jonathan was so upset that his head hurt. From now on, you better do as you're told and stay in the hospital. If you get into trouble again, I'll inform Grandpa and have you kicked out of the family. Still refusing to believe that Lucian would call off the engagement with Aubrey so easily, Frida clenched her fists as her lips trembled uncontrollably. That's impossible. That's impossible. She was just about to rush out to confirm with Aubrey when someone suddenly knocked on the door. Following that was Lucian walking in with a blank expression. Frida's heart almost skipped a beat when her gaze met Lucian's. The woman instinctively took a few steps backward. She refused to believe Lucian would actually call off the engagement, even after everything Jonathan had said. However, the second Frida saw Lucian's expression, she began to change her mind. Frida was filled with terror as she wondered what Lucian would do to her after all the things she had done with Aubrey. Lucian's gaze only stayed on Frida for a few seconds before he shifted his attention to Jonathan. I'm done. We can go now. Like his sister, Jonathan was also nervous then. Despite his harsh words, he did not think he would be able to stomach watching Lucian teach Frida a lesson. Fortunately, that did not seem like Lucian's intention. After sighing in relief internally, Jonathan nodded in response and strode out, leaving his sister behind. I'm so sorry, Lucian. I should have kept an eye on Frida. In the end, Jonathan still decided to share the blame after walking out the door.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.